All right. So thank you everyone again for being here with us today. It's the end of the semester and I know it's hard to make time for things like this. Um, I really enjoyed reading this book. I hope you will get a lot out of this talk. Amanda Morales is with us today. She's the director of residence life at TAMU-CC. That includes Miramar and Momentum Village. She's on the Housing Policy Committee. She's on the Transportation Advisory Committee. She's on the ClearNet Compliance Committee. She's basically everywhere doing all sorts of awesome stuff, including being with us here today and giving a book talk on Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass, How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life. Stick around, folks, for the end of the talk because we're going to raffle away a couple of copies. And Amanda, with that, I'm going to just pass it to you. So take it away, my friend.
Oh, awesome. That was a really nice introduction. So thank you all for having me here. I'm really excited to be here and talking with you all about this book. So a couple years back, right, kind of setting the scene, I was on a little vacation. I was taking some time off from grad school. I was trying to kind of figure out what I was going to do with my life, right? And so my goddaughter and I are at this store and I saw this book that said, You're a Badass, How to Stop Doubting Your Greatness and Start Living an Awesome Life, right? I was like, well, that sounds kind of cool. And I've always been an avid reader, always want a good excuse to pick up a book. So I picked it up. So a couple hours later, we're laying on the beach, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Shout out to the home team. And I just start reading this book and I get so into it. And there's just some really inspiring pieces, so like a lot of little tidbits of information. And I found myself, and I still find myself over the years, really thinking back to bits and pieces of this book. And I don't want to say it was like this big life-changing experience, but the way Jen Sincero set up the book and kind of laid out her thoughts and what she had found were just really inspiring. And it's some advice that I keep going back to. If you're a student that I've worked with, you've probably heard me reference her, or I've made reference to things that she said in conversation. So yeah, I just think it's a really great book, and I'm really excited to be chatting with y'all today. So I wanted to kind of start the conversation off. So I see some folks with and without video. If you have video, maybe this is the time you want to turn your video on, because I wanted to kind of start this off by going around doing introductions to see who's here and then why you're here. I see some of my friends in the room, so this is going to be fun. But I don't know, who wants to kick us off? And everybody can see the screen, the introduction screen, right?
Yes, you're sharing your screen.
Awesome.
I also want to let folks know I'm keeping an eye on the chat too. So if you'd rather introduce yourself in chat, that's fine. I am Emily Metcalf. I'm the instructional services librarian here at Bell Library. I am here today because I organized the book talks, and Amanda, your name was suggested to me as someone who might enjoy doing this. So thank you for in fact doing this.
Awesome. Thanks for the invite. And so as I'm asking everybody else to turn their video on, I realize mine's not on either. So hi, everybody. Okay.
I can jump in. Oh, look at Daniel's got a whole group with him.
Oh, hi, everybody. Hi, friends.
I'm Trisha Hernandez. I'm also at the library. I'm the Student Success and Diversity Librarian. And I came honestly because the title kind of like, it sounds like it stood out to you, Amanda. It stood out to me. So
Right.
I'm really curious about what the whole book's about. So that's why I'm here.
Okay. Awesome. Serena, you're next in my row.
Serena went ahead and just put in the chat. She is the donor relations officer on campus. That's awesome. She is here today because she's a big Amanda Morales fan and the title piqued her interest. And her mic doesn't work, frowny face. That's okay, Serena. I'm really good at talking, so this works out fine.
All right, Dan and the crew, maybe.
So just to ditto what Serena said, we are also big Amanda Morales fans, and we're really excited about this book. So anything else?
What's your name? We're with ICA. Undercoat
SEA.
Alliance here in DC.
And I too.
And I do.
Yeah.
Yes, we're excited. Love you, Amanda.
Oh, I love you guys. That's the heart. Phoebe?
Hey, I'm from the library as well. I'm the library specialist too in special collections and archives. And I came because I thought it would be interesting and I've seen the book title before. So I thought it would be cool to learn more.
Myra?
Hi, my name is Myra Orozco. I'm an administrative assistant here in the library. I'm also one of the event coordinators. And of course, the title of the book just caught my attention. So definitely I'm interested in learning more.
Brittany, you want to go?
It looks like Brittany put in the chat. Brittany is a fellow Amanda fan and says, I think we all need the reassurance that we are amazing. So I'm excited to hear about the book.
Awesome. Austin? Hi, Austin.
I think Austin's maybe working on it. Austin is also just generally interested in the book and is a freshman. Awesome. Austin, if you keep attending stuff like this, we're just gonna get through the next few years with flying colors.
Awesome. I think that's everybody who's on here, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'll start by saying that, where are we at? 50 minutes now? Definitely not enough time to cover every single concept of the book, but I did go through and kind of pick out some things. And as I was going, I was like, oh, I love this thing and this thing. And like, you'll just see like all my notes and everything. So I tried to put it into a coherent presentation. We'll see how it goes. So this is a quote that's found early in the book. So when I put in the question, who are you and why are you here? I was really hoping that somebody was going to say, I'm here to be a badass. But being intrigued by the title, I think that's super badass too. So one of the quotes earlier in the book, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. Does that resonate with anybody? Because I think sometimes, like we have all these things we want to do, but sometimes we're scared, or sometimes we think we don't have the wherewithal to accomplish them, and there comes a point, you have to decide, do you want to step out there? Do you want to make some major moves? And just a little bit about my background and my experience. So I'm from South Carolina. I'm a first generation college student. In fact, in my immediate family, I'm the only person to graduate high school in the traditional sense. So I've always really enjoyed reading. I grew up with my grandmother a good bit of my childhood, and she really instilled in me this love for reading and this love for school. And so as I went through school, I realized that it could be an outlet. I remember, has anybody ever watched the show, and this is going to date me and or others, but the show, It's a Different World. So basically it's a show about these young people who are going to college and just kind of things that they deal with. And I remember watching that show when I was little, and that was really my first introduction to college life, seeing what they were doing on campus and in their classes, interacting with each other. And I just felt that college was a way to kind of go. So fast forward, I go to college. I was going to be a teacher, but then I got really involved on campus. Shout out to our student leaders like Serena, who was hardcore in her day here at TAMU-CC. And then I realized I could work at a college, and that's kind of where we are now. So I come to this with this lens of wanting to learn, wanting to grow. I'm always all about self-improvement. I try to challenge people that I work with to be part of a learning organization. You don't want to be stagnant. You want to grow. But I think part of that is taking risks. I think back to risks that I took. One included going to Arkansas for grad school. I had an opportunity. I stepped out. I took it. And so some of these things we might come back to throughout the presentation, but I think a lot of what this book speaks to is really trying to assess, your inner thoughts, your inner desires, and then making moves on those are some of the major things that I pick up. But so some of the big concepts are thinking, what's your current mind frame and how did you get to that mind frame? What affects it? Working toward embracing your inner badass and identifying what that is. Tapping into the motherlode, which we'll talk about, and then getting over yourself. So often we're held back by like our own personal BS that it's hard to be a badass if you're kind of mugged down in all the BS, right? And then finally, how to kick some ass. Oh, see, cuss word number 1, if anybody wants to keep count. Okay, so Jen Sincero, she really talks about, she starts off the book, and one of the early things that she talks about is this notion of your subconscious and your conscious, right? And how throughout the development of your life, you've been impacted by a lot of things. You've been impacted by your family, by your friends, by the media, by different things that you've watched, different things that you've seen, and things like that kind of become buried in your subconscious and affect your beliefs and how you walk through life. Does that make sense? And sometimes, and a lot of times you see this with college students, when they get to college, they realize that, oh, wow, there are different thoughts on this topic. They're kind of challenged to grow, right? So one thing that they might have grown up thinking might be challenged, and they might learn something that kind of shifts their paradigm, like shifts their ways of thinking. So in regards to yourself, you might have certain thoughts about yourself that have been impacted by others. Just speaking on my personal experience, my mom was always really intense about weight. Like she was very, and not necessarily about me, but about herself. She was always very self-derogatory. And so I grew up with my mother who wasn't confident in herself and her looks and how she moved. And so I found that I've really held on to some of that stuff. And whenever I catch myself having those derogatory thoughts, I think, but whose standard of beauty are we judging by? Big people are beautiful people too. So because some of that stuff is buried. And part of what Jen Sincero talks about is being able to identify those subconscious things that you've learned or picked up over the years, and how to kind of battle that negative thought, right? She also speaks to letting the past affect the present or the future. So you might have had a bad experience and it might keep you from wanting to step out. Maybe you traveled one time and your family maybe their car got broken into. So you might be scared to travel, but you're letting these past things, these negative experiences impact your present situation, your future situation. And while it's good to be smart about things, you don't want to let that fear impact your journey, right? So as a group, what things do you think you all have picked up over the years, or what things might be hindering your journey? And we don't have to discuss it unless anybody wants to, but I think it's really important to be introspective and think about, is this belief or this thought I have, is it something that I really have, or is it something that I've picked up along the way and something that I can get rid of? Does anybody want to speak to that?
I can make a quick comment. So we actually I was in a discussion earlier today about this. The idea of not asking questions because you're afraid you might look stupid.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So where does that come from? A lot of times it's kind of learned. I think the example that was given was a person specifically said after a meeting, I'm so glad you asked that, because I wanted to ask the same question, but something like I was raised that if I ask questions that I should know the answer to, it means I'm stupid. So I think that notion is often learned by people that don't ask questions because you should probably know it, and it becomes very intrinsic, and it kind of becomes a default for people. Yeah, so I think that's something that's learned that has to kind of be broken.
there's so many things like that, like, oh, we don't talk about politics, but then what does that do? That prevents people from having civil discourse, or, don't ask people about their religion or certain things. And it kind of leads to people just not talking about it and not being able to have open conversations, which ultimately lead, I think, to peace and understanding and growth and all those great things, right? So another thing that I wanted to touch base on that she talks about is living in the present. So one thing, have you all ever heard, so one of the quotes she has, if you're depressed, you're living in the past. If you're anxious, you're living in the future. If you're at peace, you're living in the present. So that's a quote by an ancient Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu. I think I'm pronouncing that right. But I think what she's getting at this point is, if you're always worried about the past or worried about the future, it's hard to take advantage of the present. One story that she put in there, because there'll be a couple pieces I just want to read to you from her book. And she wrote, there's a great Hindu story about a lady who wanted to meet the god Krishna. So she went into the forest, closed her eyes, and prayed and meditated on making the god appear. And lo and behold, Krishna came wandering down the forest path toward her. But when Krishna tapped the lady on the shoulder, she, without opening her eyes, told him to get away from her because she was very busy meditating on an important goal, right? So I just thought that was kind of powerful, because if you're not living in the present, you might not see the great things that are happening in the world around you. I know sometimes I'm really bad about overworking, being a workaholic. I know this past 2 years that has kind of been an easy thing to fall into. And I realized that I'm missing out on things. Maybe I'm staying at the office late and I'm not going to hang out with my friends, or I'm not catching a FaceTime with my family. So Jen Sincero talks about, part of being a badass is really living in the moment and being engaged with your life. Another quote from this section of the book is, this is about, is one does not discover new lands without consenting to lose sight of the shore for a long time. And that kind of leads us into a discussion she has talking about faith. So there's one section where she talks about the importance of having faith and figuring out what that means to you, whether it's your religious belief, your spiritual belief, like finding something to have faith in that's greater than yourself. So having faith in yourself, having faith in others. And toward the end of the section, she really talks about this being, believing that we live in a loving, kind, and abundant universe instead of one that's petty, mean, and likes other people more than it likes you. So think about Facebook, right? Think about scrolling through Instagram. Think about the recent elections and all these signs that you see everywhere where things are negative, like there's this bad news going on, there's a lot of crummy stuff in the world. But I feel like since Jen Sincero is really talking about being able to realize that on the biggest level, being able to be positive and have faith that people are good, having faith that people want what's good, that having power and the positivity of your life. I feel like I'm really rambling at this point, guys, but I feel like it's so easy to become bogged down in what's negative because there are so many negative images out there, right? But if you take a moment and practice mindfulness, which we'll talk a little bit about later, and really stepping out and having faith that until people prove otherwise, believe the best. I've dealt with staff and student leaders who are so anxious. Well, what if they don't like me? Or what if people don't believe in me? Or what if I do the wrong thing? And then I like to challenge them. Well, what if you're successful? What if they love you? What if they laugh at all your corny jokes? I try to tell myself that one because I'm pretty jokey when I'm giving presentations and talking with people, until until you're given a reason not to, think on the positive sides. I mean, I know people, I feel like some people think that can be kind of corny. And even my friends, sometimes they're like, oh, you're so positive, like you're so positive. But I find that that's part of me being mindful and trying to protect my peace is by focusing on the positive. And I really think that Jen speaks to that in this book. So yeah, I really love the line. This is about believing that we live in a loving, kind, and abundant universe instead of one that's petty, mean, and likes other people more than it likes you. Because when we get so wrapped up in our heads, it's hard to see the goodness that's right in front of you if you're focusing on the badness. So I see I skipped a little bit. So we've already talked about the left side. Another thing that she talks about, it's not just about being present, but being actively present, because you can be somewhere, but if you're scrolling through Instagram the whole time, are you really present? Are you engaging in things? So it's just really, so she talks about it as being the big snooze. And when she talks about the big snooze, it's kind of like letting life pass you by because you've kind of accepted all the crap. For those of you that have read this, what were your thoughts on the big snooze? Because I feel like when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not making moves because I'm worried about the big snooze. And right, Emily, do you want to speak to that one?
Yeah, it actually reminds me of, I read a quote recently that was like, it's great to love yourself, but the goal is to love being yourself. And that to me is sort of the same thing, is like, I can be present and like see what's going on, but that doesn't mean I'm fully participating and enjoying what's happening. And so it's that difference between sort of like a passive acceptance of things versus enjoying yourself, engaging with others, and moving in any direction, hopefully in a positive direction, but like trying something and just seeing how things go.
Yeah. And then like judging your experience based on how you think and you feel and you believe, irrespective of what other people think, feel, or believe. So one other section I highlighted, it's really important to have validation from within instead of from outside, so being able to say, I love and trust myself. This feels right to me. I have purpose. I'm loved. I'm in control of my life. I think I'll head out and kick some ass. Is that number 2 or 3? I'm not sure. But it's really based in love and being committed to love yourself to the point where you believe in yourself and you accept your path and you trust in that and you walk in that, instead of maybe being led by, well, if I don't do this, I might not have this, or if I don't do this, my mom might not, be excited. One of my personal goals is to work overseas one day. And funny story about that, on April 1st, I thought it would be very fun to post on Facebook that I got a job in New Zealand. I was like, I got this job. I'm going to be a community director for student engagement, blah, 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 blah. And so when I tell y'all 50 people commented, I'm so happy for you. I'm so glad for you. But at the end, I even said, thank you so much for everyone who believes in me enough to believe that this is true. Happy April Fools. But people just, so the notion, like believe in yourself like others believe in you. Like you think about things like imposter syndrome. I had somebody tell me not even a year ago, and it's really stuck with me because imposter syndrome, just given my socioeconomic background and just some of my life experiences, something I've always dealt with. And he said, well, I believe in you. Why don't you believe in yourself? And he is like 3rd generation college student. He was a vice president at a university, just all these things. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Maybe I should believe in myself. So I always try to tell students that too. Positivity. So what's the next one? And I know I don't see Megan on here anymore, but I literally told her this just the other day, so we talk about existing out of fear versus living out of validation. So existing out of fear, living out of validation, of self-validation, right? Have you all ever been walking through the woods with flip-flops on? Well, I'm from the country, and so we go, like when I was young, we would play in the woods a lot. And so like you're walking, hey, I see you. There's Megan. I literally told her this story the other day. So like you're walking through the woods, right? You got on flip-flops, and then all of a sudden you feel something under your toes, like a little long thing. And so physiologically, you know, you think back to when we were hunter and gatherers, right? It's a fight or flight response. Oh my God, it's a snake. I'm going to die. The snake's going to bite me, right? So when you think about things that you're worried about, sometimes you got to figure out if it's a snake or a stick. And most of the time, and look back over your life, like you look back over your life, 9 times out of 10 or higher, it's usually a stick, right? And we get so excited and so worked up when a lot of times things that we're worried about, it's a stick, it's not a snake, you know. So just having this, I think that also flows in with your positive self perception. You know, it's I've had times in the past, especially in high school, because you know adolescence is hard, right? Where I was so down on myself. I was like, I don't look like a cheerleader. I'm from the rough side of the woods, and like where I grew up, and you know, like I had all these negative self perceptions. But as I've grown, and one thing that's really cool about being in your 30s, for those of you who haven't made it there yet or passed through there yet, is that you really start to have more faith in yourself, and you get to this point where you really want to start trying to live in through your own self perception and being really positive in that. And I think as much as we can share that with our students to encourage that positivity and that growth, I mean, it's just really important. It can be easy to get stuck in the woods and thinking there's a bunch of snakes around, I guess. So let's see. Next section is how to embrace your, so that was all kind of section 1, and it wasn't everything, but it was just some of the highlights of section 1 in the book. So then section 2, she goes into talking about how to embrace your inner badass. So if I could have everybody repeat after me, put your sounds on. I'll wait for 2 seconds. Everybody put your sounds on if you can. And say, I am special.
I am
I'm
special.
special.
All right, a little bit louder now. Say, I am special.
I
am
am
special.
special.
Do you feel a little loving?
Just me.
So I know it's everybody's different. Like there's no other you. There's no other Trisha. There's no other Dan. You know, and we really have to believe in that. Like there's no other Amanda Morales, and I didn't know I had a fan club, but shout out to ICA. I love you guys. But you know, like we just really need to walk in that. And then a way that you can do that is really practicing positive self-affirmations. I'm in this group. I'm in this student affairs we call it the fat folks group in student affairs. But when we say that, we're not being derogatory, you know, we're taking ownership of that word. I'll say all the time, you know, like I'll be talking about myself, and I'm not saying it in a negative way. I'm just like, oh, I'm a fat lady, because I can say that I personally identify as a fat woman. And then people are like, oh no, don't say that about yourself. You're not fat. And I was like, well, I'm 300 pounds and I know myself, and I'm okay with self-identifying how I want to self-identify. Right. And so anyway, long story short, one of the things that group talks about and practices often when we meet, because we're working on becoming an official coalition within ACPA. So we're a task force now working on becoming a coalition, because there really needs to be a space for folks within the profession around that work, and how fat bodies move through and interact with higher education. If you want to talk more offline about that, we can definitely talk more about that. But one thing that we start each meeting with is positive affirmations. Like we go around and we talk about things that we're good at. So I think that's something that I'd like to do with you all. If we could, let's go around the group and what is something positive that you believe about yourself? For me, I am a staunch advocate if I'm in your corner, I'm in your corner, and I'm there for you, and I'm there to help you. I really believe that about myself. I pride myself in being an advocate for others.
I'll go next. I think I am really good at my job. I think I'm a good teacher and I enjoy it. And I think that means that I am better at it because I enjoy it so much.
Yeah, that's awesome. Trisha, you want to go? And I'm keeping an eye on the chat in case y'all want to put it in the chat.
I would go with I'm really good at organizing things and keeping things fairly organized, which I think kind of in turn, as Emily said, makes me good in my position. So I do a lot of events, and I think I manage keeping things organized fairly well when I'm doing those events. So.
Yeah. And Emily just put in the chat, you're putting us all on the spot to be positive about ourselves, which is hard to do. And it's hard that's hard to do. And it kind of stinks in some ways. Because even when when I was thinking about this, I was like, oh gosh, what am I going to say? Because I'm not saying by any means that I'm running around saying I'm awesome all the time. Like there are days when I have those negative self-thoughts, but I try to be really intentional about fighting that, and kind of trying to rewire my brain, which we'll talk about a little later too. So does anybody else want to go say a positive affirmation?
You can put them in chat if you want, if you're more comfortable that way.
Yeah.
Really, Amanda, I feel like you said that and then everyone was like, oh no, I have to be
It's
nice to
hard.
myself.
No, and it's hard.
Yes.
And so, and just think about that and sit with that, But if I asked you, what's something you don't like about yourself? How easily could you spit some things out, right? And it stinks. We need to kind of shift that, we need to be able to really beef our, hype ourselves up, because at the end of the day, it's our life, how we think about it and how we move through it. It's our life. So you really got to be intentional in practicing positive self affirmation, right? I will. Lucy. Yes, Lucy. Love it. Let's see. And then doing things you love. Like how many of us do things because we have to instead of doing things because we love to do them? I've been, y'all, it's been a whole pandemic. I got here in January 2020 and I was like, this is going to be the best. I'm moving to the beach. Everything's awesome. And then 2 months later, I was like, oh my God, why is every parent yelling at me because of housing right now? I mean, it's been a rough time. And I think now more than ever, folks are really wanting to see what they love in their life, like making moves, like assessing what they're doing and making moves. Like you hear about the Great Resignation. Y'all heard about that? People are deciding that they don't like the work they're doing and they're moving and sometimes taking less pay so that they can do something that they're happier with. So scroll back to a couple weeks ago. Shout out to my friend Brittany Garcia. Woo. So we're in Ross, right? We had gone out to eat with some friends. We're in Ross. We're walking down the aisles and I see some paint. When I was younger, I loved painting, y'all. Like anything artistic, I would do it. And so then we see all this paint stuff. I was like, I'm going to buy this stuff because I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to spend some of my time and do it. And then I found a cute Bob Ross video and I followed his instructions and I painted it and then I gave it to Brittany and now it's on display in the library. Shout out to the shout out to that thing that's going to be happening, right? The showcase. But it's an example of doing how do you take time for you to do what you love? And if possible, how can you incorporate that into your work? Because I know in engaging with Emily and Patricia that they love the work they do. And so I think it brings them great joy and satisfaction. So for those of you who maybe are listening now or who might listen in the future, I always try to encourage students, you got to find stuff that you love for your career, because if your heart's not in it, it's going to be hard to like it on a day-to-day basis. And so then we come to those irrational thoughts, like all those snakes, right? it can be really hard work, but you have to be intentional in catching those hard thoughts. So as you're moving throughout the day and you see yourself in a mirror and you have a bad thought, or you're working on a project and you're like, oh my gosh, I'll never do this, I'm too whatever to finish that. You have to catch yourself and you have to break down your irrational thoughts. So I put page 58. That must have been for a reason, right? Okay, so another thing when you're thinking about, so on page 58 of the book, she says, we've gotten so used to our negative knee-jerk reactions to ourselves that we never think to question them. We simply take them as the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But once we become aware of our thought patterns and behaviors, we can consciously change them. So, if you think about the physiology of your brain, if you practice things long enough, you can change those negative thought processes. So she says to start paying attention to what runs through your mind when you look in the mirror, what happens inside when you see someone totally succeeding at something you want, but you haven't tried. What do you think and feel when you walk up to a group of good-looking, successful people, or when you try your best and you fail? You have to practice confronting these negative self-perfections, because if you've thought these things over and over and over, they have become instilled in your mind. And it's like she says, that knee-jerk reaction. But you can change your mind, but it takes practice, right? And then that's the same thing with avoid making derogatory jokes about yourself. We can fall into that, and it might seem funny, or you're trying to be funny or jokey, but it just adds to that negative self-perception. And if you're really loving yourself and you're wanting to walk in your own self-validation, you can't be self-validating yourself if you're I'm blanking on the word, if you're making those negative thoughts about yourself and negative comments. And again, you're unique. You can't be comparing yourself to others. The only time I would say comparing yourself to others is good is if you see somebody that you look up to and want to be like. So how are my actions helping me to be more like that? There is this woman that I've looked up to ever since I started college, and she's just such an inspiration to me. So sometimes I'm like, what would Linda Jacobs do? What would Dr. Linda Jacobs do? But it's never what would she do better than me? It's not like that, And then page 62, she talks about forgiving yourself. If you're human, you've made mistakes. Every now and then in my life, I've done something that was really crappy, and I've had to learn to forgive myself, because if you continue to harbor those negative thoughts, it's just not worth it. So she writes, repeat the following over and over while thinking of it, and really feel what you're saying to yourself, when you're in the process of forgiving yourself. So holding on to my bad feelings about this is doing nothing but harming me and everyone else, and preventing me from enjoying my life fully. I'm an awesome person. I choose to enjoy my life. I choose to let this go. And not just forgiving yourself about things, but forgiving others. If you're aggravated with somebody, or somebody did something or slighted you in some kind of way, how much of your personal well-being are you giving up by reliving that moment over and over and over again, or talking about it over and over and over again, when you could just be somewhere living your best life painting a Bob Ross painting, right? Just think about how you want to spend your life, And then this is something she comes back to over and over and over again throughout the book, is just this notion of loving yourself. Because I really feel that's the heart. And it's not loving yourself oh, my stuff don't stink. It's not that kind of love. It's being one with yourself, enjoying who you are, and making your moves based on your life and your wants and your needs. As long as you're not being a crappy human being and hurting people, which is something we'll talk about a little later. Any Dolly Parton fans out there? So as a woman who grew up in rural South Carolina, we love Dolly Parton. I grew up listening to Dolly Parton, and she is a queen among queens. And not just for her music and what she's done in media, but how she moves through life as a person. Not only is she this kind, altruistic, human who helps people, who takes her platform and her money and her influence and genuinely helps people and cares about people. But she also does it in a way where she's true to herself. Like, she wears her hair big because she likes her hair big. You know, she wears the shiny outfits because she likes it. And I watched a video clip of her a long time ago. And so she was being interviewed in the 70s, right? And there was this lady dressed very conservatively. And then you have this lady, Dolly Parton, and she's just living her best life, dressing however she wants to dress, right? And so the woman asked her, like, aren't you offended? Wouldn't you be offended by if people judge you for how you look and things like that? And so one of the quotes from her is, I'm not offended by all the dumb blonde jokes because I know I'm not dumb. I also know I'm not blonde. Hashtag same, Dolly. So one big point that Jen Sincero makes in this book is, like, don't care about what other people think. Because at the end of the day, whose life is it? It's your life, you know. Whenever you're, so one thing that I highlighted a lot, do not waste your precious time giving one single crap about what anybody else thinks about you. Because is that living your life, or is that living your life based on other people's perceptions, right? So she says that whenever you're making life decisions, you need to think about, is this something I want to do, or I want to be, or I want to have? Is this something that I'm going to take me in the direction that I want to go, or should not go? And then, is this going to negatively affect others? And she doesn't mean, oh, is this going to hurt their schedule because I made this decision? It's more like taking somebody's money, or doing a lousy job, or destroying a water source, or like bad things. Like, you don't want to do things if it's going to cause some badness, right? But primarily the point she's making is, when you're making your life decisions, you have to make them based on what you think and what you want to do. So the next section talks about tapping into the Motherlode. And really what I gathered out of this section is that you're really wanting to, now that you've determined that you're going to live your life for you, that you're going to fight those negative perceptions and all that, is that you really need to be intentional about the things you do based on the things you want, So one thing that she points to in doing that is the importance of meditating, of thinking, of being mindful, right? Of taking time to really think about your life and how you're moving, because it's easy, work, activity, dinner with friends, this, that, and the third. And then before you know it, you haven't really thought about what you're doing in a couple months. And then it's, oh gosh, sorry, y'all. I have a lot of emails coming in, I think. And if y'all could hear that just now, it gave me a lot of stress. But before you know it, it's January 1st again, and you're making the same goals every year. She also speaks a lot to this notion of visioning. Has anybody ever made a vision board and tried to stick to it? There's this one program I went through where it talked about, instead of waiting a whole year to set goals, setting your goals every 3 months, like setting small achievable goals, and then having an accountability buddy, having somebody to check in with you on those goals. Like, I'm in this writing group and we've kind of mapped out the year. By this day, I want to have a chapter written. I want to have submitted something to be published. I want to at least write a blog. If nothing else, I'm going to write this blog and post it online. So setting those, creating a vision, like thinking about it, determining what you want to do, and then creating like a kind of goal and map to do that. And she talked about a lot in this section, but another thing that she talked about is serving others. There's so much value in helping other people. And it's not like, oh, I'm giving this person a sandwich, look at me, take a selfie. It's that really selfless getting out there and doing some type of work for the benefit of others. because you can find so much joy in that. And again, it's not look at me, I'm helping these people. It's I know that for the good of the world, it's good to help people. If you believe in your higher power, when you think about the history of religion and all things higher power, what's central to that is loving each other and serving each other, right? So, I mean, if people have been doing that for thousands, for millennia, right? There's a lot of experiential evidence that proves that helping others also helps you, because and it's the right thing to do, right? And then again, so like she says throughout this book, love yourself. Dan, are you there, Dan? Daniel, Passano. Okay, anyway, Dan's got this really cool quote on his board. And it's, I feel like I'm gonna mess it up. That's why I wanted him to chime in. But it says, love yourself enough to oh gosh, what's the last part of it?
Sorry, it's
There you go.
love yourself for the people you haven't met yet.
Yeah. So Dan works in wellness education, you know, so love yourself, take care of yourself enough for the people you haven't met with or the people you haven't engaged with. And that, I don't know, that every time I go in his office, I see that and I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And then, sorry, y'all, I have something in my eye there. And then aside from that positive self-affirmations, also posting positive things all around. I've had this sticky note in my bathroom mirror that says you are a badass, because I've been trying to hype myself up for this presentation, because like I said, I get those negative thoughts like, what, like, who are you to be talking about being a badass? Well, they asked me and it was a pleasure. So so I mean, not just saying them, capturing the bad thoughts and saying the good ones, but just having them posted all around you, or things that make you think positive things. Because there, I mean, there's a lot of power and positivity, right? And so then the last two sections really talk about how to get over your crap, how to identify and get over your crap, and then how to kick ass, right? And there's this one, how are we doing on, oh, I'm not great on time. Okay, which one are we going to talk about? So on page 139 of the book, she kind of walks you through this activity. Well, it's kind of like this introspective activity, with the heading, become aware of the stories of what your stories are. Because if you have these negative self-perceptions, because again, if we think about the negative self-perceptions, we can kind of spout those off, but the positive ones we saw is harder, right? So listen specifically for sentences that begin with, I always, damn, y'all, the thing that popped in my head was eat too much. Oof, see, I mean, it happens, right? So like, go through this list. I always, I never, oh, I never get to work on time. That's what, that one popped up. Don't show this to Adrian, please. But I can't speak without a Southern accent is what popped in my head. I should, oh, I don't want to say that one out loud, but you need to go through these, and like the first thing that pops in your head, become aware of what those stories are and work toward defeating them. She said, we call these stories just because they're just that. They're not the truth, and they can be rewritten. You're the author of your own life, not your parents, not society, not your partner, not your friends, not the bullies who called you Fatzilla in junior high school or school bus if it was me. And the sooner you decide to write yourself a better script, the sooner you'll get to live a more awesome life, you know, so that hopefully, you know, as you're practicing this mindfulness. So if I go through it from the other perspective, I always try to help others. I'm never rude to other people. I think it's like the worst thing you can do is like be rude and condescending. I can't stand when people are rude. I should I should volunteer in the community more. I do too. Sometimes I think I volunteer for too many things on campus at the lack of the greater community, you know. So I really like that practice, because I think, you know, as you work to get rid of the negative stories, being really intentional and going through practices like that is really helpful. Another thing she says is procrastinate. Have y'all ever seen it? It's like a meme or something. It's like procrastinators unite tomorrow. Because that's like the whole joke, right? But like, gosh, if you could get back all the time that you ever procrastinated in doing something, imagine how much time, y'all, I would have so much time. Have you ever seen the video where it's and then I also have like, so I'm also have ADHD. So it's like really hard for me to sometimes to start something until there's that pressure, and then something you had 2 weeks, you're trying to get done in 6 hours. And it's just like, oh my God, my professor's gonna not like this. And I'm not really doing my best work, right? So she really talks about, you got to beat that procrastination in the butt too. Like you got to, because time is your greatest resource, right? And she also, again, talks about loving yourself. I'm sure y'all have picked up on the theme, right? Because, and going back to time is your greatest resource. That's the one thing we have a limited amount of, right? I mean, well, limited amount of clean water, all kind of stuff, right? But, and you think about your personal resources, do you want to look back on your time and realize you were scrolling through Instagram when you could have been out painting a picture or hanging out with your friends or making a move to write that book you want to write, and things like that. So it's really important to get over those negative things and start working toward your life and what makes you happy. I know we don't have a lot more time, but then how to kick ass. There's this video, if y'all look it up, ain't nothing to it but to do it. And it's this dude just walking around talking about ain't nothing to it but to do it. And he just has this whole dance with it. But sometimes when my student come up to me and they're worried and stressed, I was like, all right, well, what do you got to do? Ain't nothing to do it to it but to do it. Sometimes you just have to, and I realized that statement kind of comes with some privilege in some ways, right? That's a different conversation, but if you know what you need to do, maybe just do it, right? I also talk to students about this concept of the worry tree. Like you have this issue or this problem, right? Can you do something about it? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, do something about it. If the answer is no, release it into the ether or wherever things that you're not worried about go somewhere else, right? So just really, like there's no point in worrying about things if you can't fix it. And if you can fix it, just do it, right? Ain't nothing to it but to do it, right? And then the bad habits, we've all got them. She talks about, if we know what our bad habits are, and it's important in order to live your kick-ass life, badass life, is to kick out those bad habits, to identify them. And that's part of learning what your stories are, right? So my bad habit might be being late. And so that's something I need to work on personally for growth, because I might miss an opportunity at 8:02 in the morning. I might run into somebody in the elevator and it turned into, so kicking the bad habits, and again, loving yourself enough to do what makes you happy, I think is the biggest takeaway from this book. And that's how you live your badass life. So you're already a badass, right? So it's just recognizing your badassness. And so she got us, right? So you're already a badass, like love yourself and walk in that badassness. So that's all I have. Do we want to talk about it? Do we want to ask questions? Oh, that presentation is by me. I'm not sure who Really Great Site is. This is from Canva. Sorry, y'all. But
Thank you so much, Amanda. I am really quickly going to launch a poll here. We're trying to get a sense of like who's coming to our event. So I just launched that poll. I'm also going to share my screen. I'm going to share this screen. And we're going to do, can y'all see a little spinny wheel of names on my screen?
yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Oh, it's giving me the little timer thing. Here we go. We're going to spin and we're going to raffle off a couple of books, and then we'll have time for questions. I want to make sure we do this first, though.
Yeah.
Jen. Daniel, you've won a copy of You Are a Badass. I am gonna write your name down before I forget it. And we're gonna roll one more time because we have 2 copies to give away. Row. Congratulations, both of you. I am going to stick my email address. I'm gonna spell my name right first though, into the chat. Ro, I know where you work. I will just bring this book to you. Daniel, if you want to shoot me an email, I can figure out how we can best get this book to you. I hope you both enjoy it. I think I got a lot out of it while reading it. Amanda gave us a really nice sort of like taste, a little teaser, but there's, you know, so much more in the book that we can't get into in 50 minutes. I'm also going to drop in the chat. Oh, thank you, Brittany. Dan, I will bring this book to you. I just dropped in the chat a link to, we do have an electronic copy of Jen's, I think, second book, which is You Are a Badass Every Day, How to Keep Your Motivation Strong, and some other stuff that is cut off. But awesome. Okay, so I just wanted to go ahead and make sure we got those done before we hit the 3 o'clock. So I'm going to stop sharing. And does anyone have questions? Let's see. I don't think I see any questions yet for you, Amanda. So anyone who does have questions, feel free. You can unmute. You can put in chat.
Or we can always go to lunch. I'm always down for a chat. But I don't know. Thank y'all. This has been really nice. I was super nervous about it, if you couldn't tell, and it's been really nice chatting with you all about it.
No, you did great. I am gonna go ahead and stop the recording now.